Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Carolina Conversation. I'm your host, Shammond Williams, and I want to let you know that we really have a great individual with us today. But first, please make sure that you subscribe to the Carolina Conversation with your Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever platform you use. Make sure you comment and put like if you like it. If there's any comments, please give me constructive criticism so I can get better at this as much as possible. But ladies and gentlemen, we have an individual that's been with the University of North Carolina for 36 seasons, and even probably a little bit more before that because he was an intern in 1988. So he was able to come back in 1995, if I'm not mistaken. But more
90.
importantly, he's been intricate in the University of North Carolina, and all the information that you've seen. All of the great players that you saw that get these numerous awards, he's been the catalyst behind that. He's the individual that helps this institution go. So everything that you see, everything that you find out, you kind of hear his name all the time, but maybe don't recognize the face when you hear Steve Kirschner, Steve Kirschner, Steve Kirschner. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have him on the podcast, the great Steve Kirschner.
I cannot live up to that billing, Shammond. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, I don't understand what you mean by you can't live up to the billing because that's what you've done.
Well,
I mean,
I appreciate
it's
that.
work that you've already put in, and so I mean, it's appreciative for sure, and I'm very thankful to have you on this podcast. I mean, you're an individual that was there when I was there, of course, when I first started. When you actually came back, but you were very intricate in a lot of things that happened with me. You were very intricate in what happens with the institution. And man, I think it's just great to have you on this platform so people can find out more about you. They can relate some of the things that you've been a part of. But more important to celebrate you. It is important.
Well, that's nice of you to say. Thank you. I appreciate that very much coming from a player. That means a lot to me because that's probably the most important thing that I do is to kind of look out for our players, not just promote them and tell people about their accomplishments, but really look out for you guys because we're asking 18 to 22-year-olds to go out and right after a game. Maybe minutes after a difficult game, sometimes a tough loss, but also sometimes an exhilarating win when emotions are high. And we're asking you guys to go out and talk about why did something happen or how do you feel? And, our kids study before they take exams and they practice before they play games. My job is to make sure that you have some fundamentals, some training, some help in dealing with the outside world because our guys could be doing an interview in the locker room with one reporter or now on Zoom this year on Zoom and that comment be on ESPN Sports Center worldwide in a matter of minutes if not live. So it's we're that's the most important thing I do is to kind of help our players. So to hear those nice things from you from a former player, that's very that's good to hear from my standpoint.
Well, I'll tell you, man, this is the truth. And you and I, we have a great relationship. And it was by far, it was formed while I was in school. But, how you treated me, how you treated my teammates and the things that you did for us, like you said before, a lot of times you're dealing with young individuals and everybody's not media savvy. And I think some of the great things that that I'm sitting there talking with you, I think back to after interviews and sometimes you might say to somebody like, you shouldn't have said that, or you should have reworded that, or so on and so forth. And the great thing, and it's not a bad thing what I'm about to say. The great thing about it was your personality, and I will say this because your predecessor, Rick Brewer, I love me some Rick Brewer. You know what I mean? But anybody that knows Rick, he's not that talkative. You really don't know what's going on with him, and he was about his job, great person, but he just wasn't a talkative person, but once you begin to talk with him, then he would open up and he would talk. And so I like the relationship that I eventually built with him because, he was, it was kind of like, I'm gonna mess with him a little bit. I'm gonna poke him and see, you know what I mean? And so I began poking him. I said, hey, you know what, man, this guy's cool. You know what I mean? And then having you being so, what's the best word to place? Energetic, being able to have dialogue with us, just it was really an opportunity for us to grow in the media because just having conversation with you, Steve, and then we're going into those media things. It was kind of like, well, Steve, what you need me to say today, or what do I, what are the points of emphasis that you need me to think about while I'm doing these types of things, man. And so, do you think being younger at that time with us helped you evolve? Because we respected you and had that relationship.
Yeah, I think so. So you had said I came back I got here in 1988 as an intern, and I had worked in sports information as a student at UConn, and didn't deal a whole lot with the basketball players. I mean, I worked basketball games, but that wasn't my role. It was more to keep stats and work on record books and things like that. And when I came to North Carolina in '88, I all of a sudden Rick and Dave Losey in particular, those two really trained me in how to be a sports information director. So I interned 1 year, and then I went to the University of Florida in 1988, 89, or 89, 90. And we had everything that you could possibly imagine go wrong in an athletic department went wrong that 1 year. From NCAA investigations to drug enforcement agency investigations to we actually had a baseball player die in the middle of the baseball season because he had a rotator cuff surgery that went bad. So it was just a crazy year of sort of training for a young SID. And then I actually came back here in 1990. So when you came in as a freshman, I'd been here for about 4 or 5 years, and that experience of just being a couple years out of school. The players were not much younger than I was. And I think that was one of the reasons, I always made sure to go by the coaches' offices and just say, do you need anything? I always wanted to make sure they knew that I was there to help them do their job before I asked them to do something for me. I always thought, don't ever go into the coach's office and say, hey, I need you to do this interview until I ask them, is there something I can do for you? And Coach Guthridge, he always used to say, yeah, find me a 6'10" kid who can run and shoot threes. And I said, Coach, that's not my job. That's your job. But I always wanted to be there. I remember, something that I experienced very early on in my career with a great player who was very quiet, and now he's one of our assistant coaches, Hubert Davis. In the '91 Final Four, we lost to Coach Williams' Kansas team. And Hubert was fantastic in that game. He had either 24 or 26 points, and we didn't play particularly great that day, but Hubert had a terrific game. And I remember in the Hoosier Dome at the time in Indianapolis, going in there afterwards and having to ask the players to come out and do interviews. And as hard as it is for you guys to do the interviews after a tough loss, I usually I had to go ask and get you guys. I had to ask you to come do the interview. And that was always really difficult after a loss. And Hubert was so upset by the outcome of the game. He was in tears, and yet he had scored 24 points. So he was the guy, one of the guys that everybody wanted to talk to. And I had to kind of massage how that was going to happen. The NCAA is kind of beating down our door about, hey, you got to open up and you got to let the media in and talk to these guys, and you got to bring the star player out. And the star player that day was Hubert. But at the same time, the player who I care for and the player who's, I'm responsible for, is really having a difficult, emotionally, he was just so beat up after that loss. So learning how to manage that and making sure, yes, the media got the time it needed with Hubert, but he also got the time that he needed to kind of let it all out and gather himself. And then he's like, okay, Kirsch, where do I need to go? What do you need me to do? And that's why I say the most important thing I do, not preparing the media guides or the game notes or setting up interviews. The most important thing that I do is to be there when coach has a question or you guys had a question about, hey, a certain thing happened. How do I deal with it? I've always said, we don't tell you guys what to say. I don't think I've ever, in 32 years of doing this job, I've ever told somebody what to say. But I will say, hey, I think this is the best thing you can say,
Right.
or
Those
I wouldn't say that because here's the ramifications. And I think
right.
right now in our country, we are learning firsthand that words have consequences, and what you say, particularly when you're in a position of authority, or if you're a basketball player who a lot of people look up to, what you say matters, and it has an impact on others. It has an impact on how people hear those words and what they think you're saying by those words. And that's why the most important thing I can do is, we don't have time to do a lot of media training, formal media training with our players. That's why, being around the guys, being on the bus with them, on the plane, at the hotels, at shoot-arounds. So if a guy does have a question, Joel Berry was a great example. Joel was really intelligent player, obviously a great player, but a really intelligent player, thinking man's point guard. And when he would go to press conferences, he had a tough time because every time he got asked a question, his immediate reaction after the question was to go, and it was just his way of gathering himself,
Process. That's right.
processing the question. But so what I told him was, Joel, do that in your head. Do it silently. Take 1 second after the question not to say because
Right.
he said, no, I don't do that. And we played him the tape, or he did it 18 out of 19 questions on press conference. So the
Right.
next press conference, he didn't do it a single time. And he came out, he left the press room, and he goes, I didn't do it one time, did I? I said, no, you didn't. So it was kind of like a game the rest of his career, would he say that? And I just think that
Right.
it makes the player look better. It makes him more confident. Every interview is a job interview. I learned that from
Right.
Mac Brown. When I was here early in my career, I was doing both football and basketball, and Mac always said that every interview a student athlete does is a potential job interview. There's somebody out
Yes.
there. There's a Carolina fan. There's someone who owns a business that someday might want to employ you. And
Right.
one thing, they answer the questions about X's and O's, or why'd you make that shot, or something like that. But when you have an opportunity to stand and speak in front of people, take advantage of it and use it as a job opportunity. And that's how I kind of address it with the players.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I thought you guys did a great job with us. With Coach Smith, we would always have that mock interview at the beginning of the year. We suit and tie and those
Yeah.
types of things. But the preparation was really great, and for an individual like myself, coming from my environment, those things were some things that we had not or were not accustomed to, and being able to navigate that environment was really great. And I appreciate you for being a part of that group to help me be the individual I am, especially when it comes to the media.
Well, you
I
were a
really
go-to
appreciate
guy. I mean, Ed didn't really want to do a whole lot of interviews, and Vince and Antoine, they all got their share. But I mean, you were ACC
it.
tournament MVP, regional MVP. You earned every interview you got, and you come in your first couple of years, you were pretty quiet, but you grew into it, and that's what's kind of cool to see, that I get to see on the media side of it, is how you guys grow up. Tyler
Right.
Hansbrough, Tyler was from a really small rural part of Missouri, and when he
Right.
came here his first 2 years, he was so shy, not just with the media. He didn't really want to do any interviews at all. Partly
Right.
because as soon as the game ended, he wanted to go lift and stretch and ice bath and do all these
Yeah.
things to get ready for the next game. But he wasn't a big interview guy. And then by the time he got to his junior and senior year, he was really good. But part of what I need, one of the most important things I do too, is trying to figure out how each guy is different. Not everybody reacts the same to doing interviews. Not everybody handles them the same way. You know, Tyler, we had an ESPN guy came in for an interview, Tyler's senior year. So he'd done hundreds of interviews by then. And this national guy came in and said, you know, I'm really not looking forward to this interview. I said, why? He goes, well, you know, people tell me Tyler's not a very good interview and he's really quiet and he's shy and all that. And I said, I'll tell you what. I said, do me a favor. When you sit down with him, I said, do you know anything about fishing at all? And he goes, yeah, a little bit. I said, ask him about fishing first. And he goes, really? Right. I said, trust me, ask him about fishing. So he went off and did the interview, and the interview came over, finished, and he walked over to me afterwards, and he goes, oh my God, that was easy. And I said, why? He goes, I just got him into something he was comfortable with. And once we started talking that, then we started talking basketball. And it's kind of incumbent on me and people who do what I do. You try and find out what works for each guy and make sure that there's not one way, that everybody has a chance to do it, you know, what makes them comfortable. Some guys want to do it immediately after the game, whether they win or lose. Some guys, it's best, you know what, let them take a shower first, let them cool down and collect their thoughts. Every coach is different. You know, I've been so spoiled because the 4 head coaches I've worked with, they all get it. They all understand that dealing with the media, answering questions after a game or the days leading up to a game, that is part of the whole process. It's part of what we do. And you've got to do it win or lose, and you got to do it when you're upset. But it's part of it. And because Coach Smith, Coach Guthridge, Coach Doherty, and Coach Williams get it, they make sure that their players get it. And that was something that I'm sure Coach Smith and Coach Guthridge said to you is, hey, we're going to do this win or lose. And not just when things are good, and that helps me when the coaches have that mindset.
Right. Now, speaking of those 4, I mean, you brought it up, so I was going to wait till later, but you brought it up. There has to be some differences in those 4. So tell me, tell us the difference in those 4 individuals that you just named. Coach Smith, Coach Guthridge.
How long is this podcast? 3 or 4 hours? Goodness gracious.
Well, it's temperament up to a certain extent.
You know, what's interesting, Shammond, is there's one word that binds all of them, and it probably does most coaches, but competitiveness is all 4 have that and had that. Coach Smith was at the point in his career where, you know, I started working with him in 88. So he'd been, 27 years as a coach. I started handling, you know, I became the primary basketball contact. Rick sort of semi-retired. I became sort of the primary contact in 95. So it was his last 2 seasons. And, you know, Coach was at that point where he didn't really need to do a lot of media interviews. You know, his time, you know, his time was the thing that probably drove him out of coaching when it did. He didn't like having to go, you know, the travel and recruiting and the donor meetings, the Rams Club meetings that he had to do, the press conferences, things like that. You know, if he could have just coached practice and the games, and as you know, he loved practice more than the games, he probably would have gone on a few more years. So, you know, with Coach Smith, we didn't really have to, he was such a national figure. Then when Coach Guthridge became the head coach, the first day that the first full day that he was the head coach, you know, I popped my head in, like I said, and he said, hey, I want to talk to you. He said, I'm not Coach Smith. I'm not established. I'm 60 years old, but I haven't been a head coach, and I'm not established like Coach Smith was. I need to be more visible. Because from a recruiting standpoint, you know, people don't know who I am. So I need to do more. And Matt was a little bit different. Matt jumped up his first game and stomped his foot to get the attention of one of the players, and the ref turned around and gave him a technical foul. And he was just trying to get the attention of his player. You know, he's 6'8", and, you know, Irish Catholic out of New York. And, you know, he was a little bit more brash. You know, and he was going to say things that maybe got under the skin of the opponent a little bit. But he did it his way. And Roy's a little bit more kind of like Coach Smith, and then he's been doing this so long, he's comfortable in it. He doesn't need to do interviews simply to be visible in the game. But Coach Williams also understands that he's kind of a guardian of the game. That when there are big issues, whether it's Black Lives Matter or name, image, and likeness, or things that are about the game, the whether we should be playing or not, rules changes, the sort of the direction the game is going. Those things mean something to Coach Williams, and
Right.
it's really important that we don't do every opportunity that comes across, because he'd never be able to coach the team. All he'd be doing is interviews. So he trusts me, which is really helpful. He trusts me with his time. I told him the very first day he was here as head coach, I said, Coach, the single most important asset resource that I have is your time. And I won't abuse your time. If I ask you to do an interview, there'll be a reason for it. It either helps our program, our school, if it might be something, COVID, to people wear masks. I mean, there's going to be a reason why I ask you to do something. And for 18 years now, he's trusted me, and that's been really helpful. And in terms of being similar, they were all that way. Coach Doherty was that way from day one. He walked in and said, Kirsch, if you need me to do something, you let me know. And he was really easy to work with. I really enjoyed the 3 years that, Matt, obviously, it was a bit tumultuous, and it didn't end well, and record wasn't, as what it was before or after. But he and I had a great relationship, and have continued to have a good relationship since then, which has been important. So they're all a little bit different, but they're more alike in many ways than they were different.
Yes, I would say so. Yes. And so, this leads me to go back to, because there's a lot of events that happened in my career that you were very intricate in, and helping, and you were part of that, because you always have to go speak or something like that. And so I want to go back. In that 1997 ACC tournament, you were the person to kind of come to me and was like, Shammond, and it's funny because it's so much going on, and then you hear a voice, Shammond, you're going to be the MVP. And it was like, you heard it, but it didn't register. And so being able to deliver those types of events for kids, how is that, man?
Well, I didn't deliver it. You delivered it. You delivered it for yourself, the way you played against NC State, and
you delivered the message.
Well, it's fun when you get an opportunity to pass along good news, to let a player or a coach know that they've earned something, and you earned it. I mean, that you look at that team, Antoine Jameson, Vince Carter are going to be in the Hall of Fame, Adi, Ed, and here you are, Mac. I mean, Serge that year, you earned that. You played your way to that, and it's cool. I remember when you were number 15, not number 3. I see those 2 number 3s up there, but I remember you were 15. Right?
Yeah.
I remember watching you when you were at Fork Union the year before you came to North Carolina, going, "Who is this guy we just signed?" Right? And so it's cool and that's the fun part of my job. I was saying how you got to see Tyler develop, and other players that when they come in and they're real quiet, but then they become team leaders, and they become more vocal, and they become just more comfortable in their skin. Well, to see you, who came in, and you weren't the most heralded of recruits, but you earned your way. You got a Final Four, ACC championships, ACC tournament MVP, regional MVP, took Coach Smith's last team to the NCAA, to the Final Four. I mean, that's cool. Played in the NBA. So to see a guy like you, come in and then leave at such a different state in your career, that's the beauty of being in college athletics. That's why I've stayed, I mean, shoot, 36 years, like I said, going back to my student years at UConn. It's the only job I've ever held. I mean, I'm 54 years, almost 55. I've never
Okay.
held a job a day in my life that wasn't in sports. Which
Right.
is not many people can say that. And I don't even
Right.
think most days it's not really a job. It's what I enjoy to do. When I go home at night, I don't mind doing stuff at home late at night because it's fun. I enjoy looking up stuff. I enjoy, I remember when one stat. Now this has been a while now. You're a couple of years out of school here, but I remember looking up. I think at the time you were the only player in the ACC to be in the top 10 in the league in points and assists. And I remember you and Tim Duncan had a stat thing that was similar, and I mean that was pretty. That's how I like to find stuff like that. I like to be able
Right.
to look and say, hey, here's something that Shammond did, shooting threes or whatever, and that's kind of cool to be able to put someone's career in the right perspective. And
Right.
I like Danny Green. I was looking at the 76ers bio last night, or Danny's bio in the 76ers media guide, and I was like, I could not believe it. Bothered me as an SID that it didn't say in his bio. There's this one stat we looked up it was October, when the
Right.
Lakers won the championship, that he and LeBron are the only two players in NBA history to start for three different franchises that won an NBA championship. Think about that. Danny
Awesome.
Green, he was a
Yeah.
second round pick,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
He
Yeah.
was probably the sixth most heralded player on the '09
On the,
championship team.
right.
And
That's
here he
absolutely
is. He's won three rings and all. And, so we looked up this stat that he and LeBron were the only two players in history to do that. And we put that
right.
out, and it got some attention. And I thought, that's cool. And that's how, those are the kind of little behind the scenes that I
Yeah.
like to look up, things like that kind of can summarize a career or a season or even a game,
Right.
and let people know, find some aspect of everybody can look at a box score, but I want to find
Right.
something in that box score that stands out as to, paint, what behind the numbers can maybe help a writer, write about the game, or could help coach,
Right.
a coaching
Mm-hmm.
point that coach could talk to the team about. Um,
Right.
Certain things like that. The guys in the locker room weren't too happy the other night at Miami when I pointed out what our 2-point shooting percentage was. Coach was like, hey, you got any notes? And I said, yeah, Dayron, 16 rebounds. Leaky
Yeah.
had a career high, career
I,
high
yeah.
threes, career high points. I said, yeah, we were 12 for 41 from 3-point range, or from 2-point range.
2-point
And,
range.
and the guys were like, don't say that. Don't tell them those things.
Tell them the truth, Steve. You've always done it. Tell them the truth.
Yeah, that's kind of you know what? Coach Williams has a good line. He says, if you tell the truth, you never have to worry about covering up a lie. So,
Never have to worry about that. And so let's move on a little bit. A few months later, after that ACC tournament for us, and you had the conversation, because I've had Mr. Bador on here as well. You had the conversation. You guys had the conversation with Coach Smith about him stepping away from basketball. Now, how was that for you? That had to be a whirlwind for you,
yeah,
because what Mr. Bador told
absolutely.
you're the one that convinced Coach Smith that he had to do the interview. He had to make it public.
Yeah, I don't know about convincing Coach Smith, but yeah, no, that was
Yeah.
true. I mean, that was October 8th of 1997, and
Yes.
I was in my office, and I got a phone call that said, Steve, please come over to the basketball office. And at that point, the basketball office was literally I mean, it was 10 feet outside our door was
Right.
the door to the basketball office. So I walked in and obviously dropped everything I was doing and ran over there. And
Right.
there was Dick Bador, Coach Guthridge, and Coach Smith. And Dickie and Coach Guthridge were sitting in front of Coach Smith's desk, and Dickie looked at me and said, Steve, Coach Smith has decided to retire, and Coach Guthridge will be the next head coach. And I said, okay. And Dickie said, no, seriously. And I said, Dickie, I don't think this is the kind of thing you would joke about. So I get it. Okay.
Right.
And at that point, Coach Smith said, now I don't want to have a press conference. And
Right.
I said, Coach, I'm sorry, but we have to have a press conference. He goes, no, I don't want to bother the guys. And, they're, I said, sir, I'm sorry, but with all due respect, no, we have to. I said, no, we can't do that. We cannot have a press release to announce that Dean Smith is retiring. No.
Right.
And, one of the things that I've always been most proud of is that the assistant coaches, particularly Coach Ford, Coach Hanners, they would always sit me next to Coach Smith at dinner. Like when we would go to the Angus Barn
Right.
or Vinny's before we would go on road trips. When I first started traveling with basketball a couple years before that, they would always sit me down next to Coach Smith because I loved asking him questions. I loved talking to him about the 76 Olympics or different things in his career. And
Right.
at that point, Coach Smith was even a little bit hard for the assistants to talk to because they held him in such high regard. And he was older
Right.
than them, and he was almost unapproachable for them. And I can't shut up. So I mean, I was like, God, you kidding me? I'm
Yeah.
having dinner with Dean Smith, and you don't think I'm going to ask him questions about his career? And
That's
so
right.
I didn't really have a problem voicing my opinion of, respectfully, but Coach, you can't. You're a legend, 36 years. You're the winningest coach in college basketball history at that time. We need to do this right. And I always remember Coach Smith said, "Yeah, but we're gonna have him practice anyway that day or something." You guys had to I don't know. And then I think he's no. At that point, he said, but he didn't want the players. That's right. He goes, okay, but the players are not. You're not going to ask the players. And if I recall right, you and Antoine and maybe Vince or so, you guys
Me and
nixed that, right?
yeah, me and Mac, I told him, he was like, you guys don't have to come. I'm like, man, we coming, and we're gonna be dressed. Everybody that can make it, because he didn't want anybody to miss
Yeah.
class. You, yes, I don't want anybody to miss class. In my head, oh, well, I hold you in high regard, coach, but you're not coaching anymore. But
Well,
and
that's
so,
why we had the press conference when we did. That's why the press
right, right,
conference was in the middle of
right,
the afternoon.
yeah,
Well, I always one of my favorite stories of that. I actually have several. It was such an amazing time. One
right.
was that he didn't tell you guys he was retiring until after you ran the
After,
mile run because he didn't want it to affect you guys had worked so hard, in August and September and the first week of October to get ready for the mile run. He didn't want
that's
the
right.
news to bother you guys on the run. I've
I,
always loved that part. And then the part that a lot of people don't know is, we started I said, look, we have to prepare. This is a major press conference. And I
right,
have to be able to invite people from across the country. Right now with the pandemic, we wouldn't be able to do it. We'd do a Zoom. But even
right.
now with budgets, you don't have as many national media who travel. But back then, there were national media from all over the country
It
that
was.
came to that press conference. And the reason they did is we started calling them immediately saying,
Sure did.
look, North Carolina is going to have a major press conference tomorrow. It's not NCAA related. It's not a health issue, but we're having a major, and it was kind of code for everybody kind of knew what we were saying. But it allowed media to literally came from all over the country to that press conference. But the reason it leaked out, if you remember, was the 76ers were practicing
Right.
at the Smith Center that week. And
Yes.
David Aldridge from ESPN was in the building to do a feature story or something. And when you guys came out of the locker room, you guys weren't very good poker players. So you guys spilled the beans to Stackhouse and maybe even Montross, who were on that team, and they told ESPN, and ESPN told the world. So our own players leaked out the news, which was fine.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but that's how the story broke nationally, was because the 76ers were here.
Yeah. And it broke fast because I think we left there, went to get something to eat, and I remember getting back to my dorm. And when I got back to my dorm, there were already beat writers and people out. Like, it was like, whoa.
And there wasn't even any social media at that point. Can you imagine that?
There was no social media. And they were like, true Coach Smith is, I'm like, you just walk in. Granville had a lot of media out there that night, and it was within an hour and a half, if that. So yeah, I know that had to be something. And so it leads me to go to 98. And, a lot of things that I ask you about, it's in relation to me because that's what I know. So 98, having Guthridge, I remember you, and I think if you watch the tape, you can see it at the end. But when we were playing Georgia Tech at Georgia Tech, and the 3 overtime game,
somebody had 42 points. Who was that? Vince or Antoine? Which of those guys had 42?
I'm not sure, but I'm listening to you, and I ask you to recall these things because it's something I want to say in the end. But I remember the game being it was so long that when the game finished, I remember holding my shorts and bending over and was breathing like, and you ran up to me. You ran, like my head was down. You ran, you was like, Shammond, you hit me, Shammond. And I was like, yeah. He was like, do you know what, you know how many points you had? And I was like, yeah, maybe like 26 or something. He was like, no, 42. And I was like, okay, okay, Steve, I appreciate it. You know what I mean? But man, like just like I can remember that and how excited you were for me. And even when you watched the game, you could see you like talking to people. Like, I don't know if you're talking to one of my family members or something, but you were like, I see you doing numbers and stuff like that during the game, man. It was like, after the game, because I didn't know, you know what I mean? Because that's not what you're trying to accomplish. But the excitement, and then you being able to, again, give me that information, like there again, there's another connection with you and I. But, just your excitement of watching things go on and like evaluating things and sometimes seeing people break records. How's that for you?
It's the best part of the job. I remember in 2009 when we won the championship in Detroit, the national championship. I remember going up to Tyler Hansbrough on the court and just kind of grabbing him by the shirt and just saying, do you realize now you are the most accomplished player in the history of Carolina basketball? I don't mean the greatest. He's certainly in that group of great players.
Oh, yeah.
But in terms of his accomplishments, because nobody's ever won 2 national championships. He finally got that. He'd been the National Player of the Year. He set so many records, team records, individual records. And nobody had ever been a 4-time first-team All-America in ACC history, 4-time first-team All-Conference. So what he did, and to tell him that, and usually when we told Tyler things like that, I don't know if it didn't register or he didn't care. He was just so, but I remember the look in his eyes that night when I told him that. Something did click, and he really, that was really cool to him. In 17, when we beat Oregon in the national semifinals, Kennedy Meeks was the player that TV wanted to talk to. Game ends and we've got to bring, regular season games. Coach doesn't. We have to go into the locker room first, and then we come out.
Right.
That's a Coach Smith legacy that's been passed on because he didn't want to make the whole team wait because the star player was doing an interview. Well, at the NCAA tournament, you don't get that choice. TV says you go here, and here's when you go and you do it. So we're standing there with Kennedy, and I said, Kennedy, do you realize what you did? 25 points, 14 rebounds, X for X from the floor. I said, those are historic numbers. And he, that he was like, wow, really? And that made him feel good. And those kinds of moments when you do get to pass those things on, or in the locker room, Coach Williams has afforded me a wonderful opportunity after a couple years when I think he realized he could trust me, and he knew that I was looking for things that he was looking for. He usually asks, hey, you got anything? Anything jumps out, or if a guy has a career high, or even just the other night, like we were talking about at Miami, to say that Dayron had 16 rebounds, and that
Right.
Leaky scored, had a career high, and he was 4 for 4 from 3-point range, and the guys get all excited by that, and that's the coolest part of the job, is to be able to pass along those little things to the players. I remember, see, and here I'm saying, I remember we had a player who made the academic all. Oh, it was Zeller. Tyler Zeller became the ACC Scholar Athlete of the Year for the second year, and was a first team. He was the academic All-America of the Year for the whole country. And I remember going down to practice, and we got the word while they were practicing, and I went downstairs and I kind of pulled Coach aside and I told him, and he said, well, when we huddle after practice, why don't you tell him? And that was cool, to tell a kid, you're the academic All-America of the Year, in front of his peers, in front of his teammates, and to just step back then and watch them react. Those are the highlights of why you do this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And Steve, when in closing, man, if you begin to listen, if everyone is listening, he's regurgitating things from years. Like, you look at what you're talking about, I was talking about 95 and 96. You began talking about 2017. All those things that you have experienced, but you remember, means that it meant something to you. And that's the part that I appreciate. I appreciate more than anything else that the effects that you've had on not just our program, but people. I talk about myself, the effect that you had on me. Like, there's no way that anybody can ask me, like, Shammond, how did you feel about this time in your career when this happened? Because most people want to talk about accolades and things like that. What do you remember? How did that process go? And every time I talk about that process, I have to bring you up. And so just to think about the effect that you had on me, and not just telling me about the wars, but the relationship that, you can remember that, you can appreciate that. You
appreciate that very much.
All the kids, Steve, all the kids that you've been able to do those things for, man. And I know to you, it doesn't seem big. It doesn't seem big at all because, like, that's what you do, man. Like you said, this is part of who you are. I love doing these things. And what you've actually been doing for us is bigger than the program. You've actually helped people get an understanding or appreciate some of the things that we've worked hard for. Like you said before, kids have worked hard to be in these positions, and fortunately enough to do some things that are warranted. You allow those people to see those things that other people may not see. And for me, man, I want to make sure that I let you know how much I appreciate it.
I do appreciate that.
How much I'm thankful for it. And I'm pretty sure I speak for a lot of guys. And so, even with that, we talked about, Mr. Rick Brewer, and talked about Dave. And you looked at those guys, and you looked at Rick's mentality. Well, Rick's demeanor, and you looked at Dave's demeanor. Then you combine those guys, you get yourself. And then we talk about, like, the other people that help you. Like, one of my other good friends is one of your colleagues, Matt Barr, was like, Matt, man, like, just you two guys, man. It's like, especially when I come to Chapel Hill and I walk in through the tunnel, usually I might see Matt first, like, Matt, what's going on? Yeah. And then I get to you, you might be running or something. You like, I'd be like, hit your Kirsch. You'd be like, Shammond, and then And man, I just want you to know, man, that the appreciation and love I have for you guys, man, it is it's real. But I also see the reciprocation from you guys and how you've always treated me and what you stood for not only for me, but for all these kids in that program for so many years, man. So I
It's
most
nice of
definitely
you to
want to
say.
say
We
thank you.
love when you guys come back. It's fun for us, and it's one of the great things about this program, from Coach Smith through Coach Williams, is the importance of the continuity of the players,
Right,
and the players and the staff and the coaches, the managers, Matt and Kevin Best, people that have helped me. It's that's the beauty of this program, is that here we are now. You haven't played here in over 20 years yet, just having a conversation like you're right here. And that's
right,
the cool part. And I think that's something special that you all, particularly you and the coaches and the players and the managers, that's what you create. And then those of us who are around the program, we call them the AYOs, the all you others. That's what we get to experience, and we get the benefit of it. And for me, it's been a privilege to be here for as long as I have. And I know that I'm not a Supreme Court justice, and I don't have a lifetime appointment, but I would love to do this job another 20 years. I want to be one of those guys that's in my
right,
70s and still coming to work at Carolina and work with Carolina basketball. And it's the best job that I've ever could have hoped to have. And it's because of the players and the coaches and those relationships. The games are great. I mean, I've been so spoiled. I mean, I don't know if there is another SID in the country who's taken 11 teams to Final Fours. I'm spoiled. I mean, I have colleagues, I have dear friends of mine who've been doing this job just as long as I have, and they've never been to one Final Four. And I've been able to
right,
go to 11 Final Fours with Carolina, and that stuff's great, but it's not to say, hey, look how many Final Fours. It's I know from experience how much fun it is when we go to a Final Four, and how
right.
much enjoyment I see in your guys' eyes, and I get to watch that celebration. I don't get in the celebration, but I love watching those locker room celebrations when we win a big game. And that's the fear for me. That's why I don't ever want to do it, because I know as soon as I take another job that we'd win like 5 championships in a row, I'd miss out. So and it's that fun that we get to have, and how I get to see you guys react. That's why every year it's always special. And I'm greedy. I've been to I want to go to 12. We've won 4. I want to win 5, because I want to write another book. We get
Right,
to write a book. Matt Bowers, Adam Lucas, and we've had 3 championship books. I want to write another
right.
book.
Okay, okay.
And those are the kinds of things where, that's what the job never gets old, because there's always another year, and it's just so much fun to be around.
Right, right. Well, man, I appreciate having you. I must say one thing before we finish. No, you just said it. I'm probably have to make a change on that. I think you said AUO. Is that
AYO,
AYO? Okay, I must
AYO,
have.
the all you others.
Okay, to all you others. Now I'm gonna go back to my Coach Smith thing. Now I can't allow you to say that. I need you to change that for me. If
Okay.
I don't know if I've added too much. I need you to change that for me,
All right. To what?
because family.
I hear you. I hear you.
You're not. You're not the others.
Thank you.
You are family. And
That's nice of you to
and
say, Shimon. Your
it's
family
not
too.
nice to say. It's the truth.
Thank
What
you.
you guys do allow us to be who we are, and we're a family. From the athletes, student athletes, to the staff, to the media staff, and to our fans. We're all one family, and that's what makes us a great institution. Not just a great program, but makes us a great institution. We are family, regardless of
Here,
what
here.
capacity you are. We are family. So if you would, for me, please,
I will.
if you can get rid of that acronym and say, "Hey, we're part,
Done.
this is part of the family, part of the family, man."
Well said,
Well, ladies and
Shimon.
gentlemen, Oh, man, that's the truth. That's how I feel. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say, give a great thank you to the great Steve Kirschner. You know, this guy, like you heard before, you know, you were able to get Roy Williams on the podcast because of this man right here, you know. So he's a big guy on campus now, believe you me. But Steve, I want to say thank you, man, for participating in the Carolina conversation. And God permitting, hopefully I get the chance to see you soon.
Been a pleasure, Shammond. Looking forward to next week get another player on here.
Yeah, no question. You know who I'm going with next week?
Who you got?
I'm gonna go with Mac Tar. I'm going with Mac Tar, and then I'm going to go with. I'm gonna see can I get gosh, I had this COVID, man. It's killing my brain. An AD, the AD at SMU.
Oh, Rick Hart.
Rick Hart.
Yes, Rick's a good guy.
Yeah.
Hey, I got to tell one quick MacTar. Can I tell one quick MacTar story?
Of course you can.
All right. So when MacTar was here, obviously, and you were here, I mean, that's when Mac Brown left to go to Texas. Well,
right.
I had in my office in the Smith Center, right across from the basketball office, in my office, right. I had a big poster, Carolina football poster on my door of Mac Brown. And when Mac left, you know, everybody was, you know, little feelings were bruised and all that. We've all gotten over that. I mean, he had a great opportunity to go to Texas. But at the time, right. You know, people were disappointed because, you know, we loved him so much. And MacTar walked into my office and he ripped down the poster and he goes, "I'm the only Mac in town now."
That's right. That sounds like Mac. Yeah.
Mac's a good guy.
Yeah, he is. Great. I love him. Well, thank you again, Steve, man. We appreciate what you do, what you've done and what you do for the program. And
thank you.
Get those guys back to playing, man. We appreciate
yes, sir. Need them to shoot like Shammond.
Working on one. I got a little junior. He shoots pretty good.
All right, good.
Thank you, man.
All right, Shammond. You bet.
All right.